One of Andros Townsend's former clubs, Tottenham Hotspur, as another managerial candidate falls by the wayside. Are Tottenham proving they never really had a clear plan when they sacked Mourinho? And if not, why not? Andros, what do you think? Do you think in your heart of hearts Tottenham had a clear plan in mind?
No, I think Simon's probably in a better position to judge than me, but it's clear that to sack a manager the week of a cup final, there's been some sort of altercation. Something's happened, there's been an argument, there's been a fallout. So that's clear. So in that sense, they've clearly not had a plan, because this is something that's obviously happened and they've dealt with it, and then they've tried to think of a solution afterwards. Am I right, Si?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think often people have this myth in their minds that every time a manager is fired, there is a blueprint of replacing them, and often there isn't, because you're dealing with the person that needs to go whilst you have ideas in your mind about who you'd like to bring them in. When I fired Peter Taylor, I knew I wanted Neil Warnock to be the manager, but I hadn't spoken to Neil and I hadn't buttoned Neil down. And if Neil hadn't have wanted to have come, as some of these managers may well not want to come to Tottenham for a variety of reasons, it doesn't give you an ideal scenario where you simply have a smooth transition from one manager to another. Now, I know what Jim will say, and he's right to say it. The best clubs will have the best laid plans. But that doesn't always work, and the world has changed. Tottenham are now not in a position where they have quite the lure that other clubs have, like Manchester United and Liverpool and Chelsea, where they can just simply do as they want, because Tottenham are operating under a certain degree of restriction financially.
Yeah.
So I do think it presents a challenge.
But Simon, you just said it though, mate. You always had a plan in mind, didn't
I didn't
you,
say
at
that,
Palace?
Jim. I said no.
When you got rid of one manager.
I said that you don't always have
Ultimately, though.
Well, no, that's not true. Actually, I'm not being contraire, because sometimes you're focusing on the fact that the guy in front of you needs to go, and you need to make that change. What you tend to look at is, who can I put in the gap? Who can I bridge the gap with whilst I make my decision? And often that's why you see managers taken out on international breaks, or when there's times in space so people can have a pause to think about the solution that they've got. Because there's one thing thinking that a manager represents a certain type of outlook, and there's another thing when you get them in front of you and find out actually they're completely different. Their wishes are completely different. In an ideal world, you speak to somebody before you fire the guy, and then you put them in place directly after you fired them. In the real world, it often doesn't work that way.
And I think the most telling point in this situation is even Ryan Mason, he didn't know he was taking charge of Spurs until an hour before the training session. So that says to me that there was no premeditated plan to sack Jose Mourinho, because he would have said, Ryan, listen, I'm thinking of getting rid of Jose Mourinho. Can you take training tomorrow? There was none of that. It was an hour before training, which means there must have been a meeting, something's happened, and they've gone their separate ways.
Yeah. Are you beginning to come around to Simon's argument that Ryan doesn't have, in Simon's words, the chops to do the job? Or do you still think Andros, he should be a contender and considered as a candidate?
People are confusing with what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you can get a Ten Hag, if you can get a Pochettino, if you can get a Nuno Santo, then of course go for that. But failing that, if we start hitting July the 1st and players start coming back for pre-season training, you're still interviewing managers, and these other top managers taking other jobs, then you have to bridge the gap. Like Simon said, you have to bridge the gap. And it's not a situation Spurs would want to be in, but unfortunately, if they get to this stage, then you may need to give it Ryan Mason another interim spell, or full-time for a year or 6 months, until you can get a top manager in. I think the long-term goal for Levy is Pochettino. You couldn't get him this summer. Would Spurs fans take an interim manager for a year and Pochettino next summer?
I mean, Simon, should we not begin to question Tottenham's ambition, that they haven't been able to land any of these managers yet? Not just one, none.
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think some of the things that Daniel said last week were a little bit disingenuous. I think he wasn't put through the mill on scrutiny about some of the observations he made when he was interviewed by Spurs TV. But I don't suspect that it's quite as simple as a lack of ambition. Daniel will very well know that Tottenham have got to get hold of themselves. They've got a fantastic stadium that's costing an inordinate amount of money. They need to get a team capable of embracing that, which clearly means they need to get a manager. They're not the only club that, it's not as if this is a rarity at this moment in time. We're seeing a number of football clubs. You saw how difficult it was for Celtic to get a manager. It's not as easy as people think it is, because managers now are a commodity that have very, very definite views about what they're entitled to. Conte will have come out of Inter Milan, rather than accept the fact that maybe things need to be a little bit different because the landscape economically is different. Conte went, not having any of that, I'm off. So they are a difficult breed. Now, you're right, Jim, what you're about to say, which is, well, if you get Conte, you get a proven winner. But Tottenham are not in that situation where they can write checks out like Manchester United can, and write checks out like Man City can, and clearly like Chelsea can. They're in a different situation. And Pochettino going back to Spurs, I think, is for the birds. I think their relationship broke down for a variety of reasons, and those reasons haven't changed. There's nothing different about Daniel Levy. He hasn't suddenly gone through a personality transfusion. He's the same guy operating in the same way, and they'll have the same challenges.
Do you not think the fact that Pochettino was considering it, that Daniel
I think that was a
Levy
power play. I think basically he wasn't getting what he wanted from Leonardo at PSG, and he just wanted to give him a little wake-up call, a quick one across their bows to suggest that he might be off to Tottenham, when really and truly that was nipped in the bud very quickly.
Yeah.
The idea, if we sit here, Jim, and we get, when the Euros are over, and Tottenham's only option is Ryan Mason, then there is something serious. You do not go and get this guy, what's his name, Paratici, yeah. Paratici. What is the point of getting a heavyweight director of football in if you're going to give him a lightweight manager?
Yeah. Andros, not dropping you in it in the process, but have you spoken to Ryan May?
No, I haven't.
No. I mean, I'm just wondering where his head is at the moment. He's probably taking time out, but he's still in the mix. It's as simple as that.
Listen, he may have not won every single game like the fans expected, but listen, he steadied the ship. He did the job. He got them into the Europa Conference, I think it's called. No, that's not an achievement, but they've finished above Arsenal. He didn't lose the dressing room. By all accounts, all the players came out and said how well he did and how much he was like Pochettino, and it was a joy to work with him. So,
yeah,
Tottenham could do far worse.
Well, Simon, you might not be having Ryan Mason, but you might well have this. Just hearing that West Brom have agreed £2 million compensation with Barnsley for a fella you know well, Valerian Ismail, to become their new manager.
I think that's sad for Barnsley, because I really felt that, I was surprised that Barnsley didn't do slightly better in the playoffs. Maybe just the ultimate lack of quality undid them, because certainly the spirit and the drive that their manager exuded was everything you want, from broad shoulders to the manner in which he dealt with the media to the manner in which his team set up. I think that's a really, really good acquisition for West Brom.
Did he play under you at Palace?
No, but he was under Mark Goldberg.
Okay.
So obviously I know who he is and what he represents.
Jim White and Simon Jordan, Monday to Thursday morning, 10 till 1. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.